Hey there, Heather, hello there, Chef Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 sports video. And this will be the first Cutter Top 10 sports video with a new aesthetic. As you can see to my right, the Austin Matthews calendar and all that. Although it kind of will give away when I am taping this, like what month I'll be taping this. But, that's all right. It's the end of February, so, this will go out on February 28th, so why fight it? Anyhow, we are going to be doing the top 10 NBA controversies of all time. Obviously, wearing the jersey, his shirt jersey, of Mr. Kyle Lowry. That will tell you all you need to know. So, we're going to look at the NBA's biggest conduct problems and all that. So anyway, here we go. Number 10 is the decision in 2010. So anyway, LeBron was the number one draft pick by the Cleveland Cavaliers. You know, he played school in Ohio and in 2003 and helped Cleveland out with an NBA title run in 2007, but lost to those pesky Spurs. In 2010, he was a free agent, so LeBron decided to hijack ESPN for a 1 hour special to deal with where he's going to go in free agency and all that. So he basically said, this summer I will be taking all my talents to South Beach, which meant Miami. So the Miami Heat were getting some credibility, although Dwayne Wade was a pretty good player for the Heat in the first place. And they had won an NBA title in 2006. Anyway, LeBron made the announcement to join the Heat. And of course, it was criticized because it took so long. Like, why would you hijack ESPN for 1 hour when you could have done it for 30 minutes? Although it was for charity. So anyway, LeBron went to Miami with D Wade already there, and Chris Bosh leaving the Raptors from Miami. They were the big three trying to give Miami title after title after title. They won two with those three on, but LeBron soon got the itch to go back to Cleveland. And Bosh would be okay, but he would be injury prone. And D Wade was around for many years before going to Chicago, where he should not have been. And of course, Cleveland fans burned his jersey and burned everything until he came back to Cleveland and embraced them. Weird. Number 9 is the relocation of the Seattle Supersonics in 2008 to Oklahoma City. Seattle was a pretty good team. 1967, they came to the NBA as an expansion team, basketball to the Northwest. Portland would soon follow. But yeah, Seattle was a decent team. Lanny Wilkins was a great coach. Gus Johnson, a great player as well. And the Sonics were looking pretty good. They were a good city to be in. And all that. They won the 1979 NBA title. They should have had another title in 1994 with Kemp and Payton, but they were the 1 seed, but they got shocked by Denver in Game 5 of the first round. So anyway, yeah, it was controversial. Like, Seattle would have ownership problems. Their owner, Clay Bennett, said that we're not going to move the team from Seattle. Of course, a year later, he got the okay to move it to OKC. Oklahoma City, this was not their first trip for the NBA team. Oklahoma City actually had control of the New Orleans Hornets. Well, the New Orleans Pelicans. Right? No, the New Orleans Hornets. When the Hornets franchise moved from Charlotte to New Orleans. Because of Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans had to move to Oklahoma City. And what was the other city? Tulsa? No. They had to play in 2 cities. But yeah, Oklahoma City had the team. And for the Hornets for a while. Who loves you, Mary? I do. So anyway, Seattle would soon lose the team to Oklahoma City. It was just terrible how they were lied to and all that. Seattle's been trying for years to get an NBA team, and allegedly they might get an expansion team. Who knows? Number 8 is the gambling issue. in the NBA. Of course, this is happening in all four sports: baseball, basketball, football, hockey. That gambling sites are sponsoring things. You see all these stupid gambling, Bet365 or Bet MGM or uh, Bet Rivers online, like during commercials of games and all that, and people are upset. My thing is, it's okay to have the gambling ads, but you should put them on after like a certain time. There should be a watershed time, because there's little kids watching hockey games at 7 o'clock at night. So anyway, yeah, the Sonics aside, but yeah, this was terrible with the gambling, and it's claimed a few people, including Jonte Porter, who was a bench player for the Raptors, who would bet on himself to suck horribly and all that. How did he not get caught? But he did get caught, and he was banned from the league. He's allegedly trying to make a comeback in North America, but I doubt that highly. But yeah, the gambling problems are going to just get worse and worse and worse. It's not the worst gambling thing in NBA history. There'll be one coming up shortly. Number 7 is the Magic Johnson HIV announcement in 1991. It's nothing that Magic did. Like, the controversy isn't on his head. Magic Johnson was this Greek guy, 6'9", coming out of Michigan State. Could play point guard, which point guards usually are like 6'1". But Magic played well, helped the Lakers in his rookie season in 1980 to win the NBA title, playing center for an injured Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and helping the Showtime Lakers look good. In 91, they lost the final to MJ and the Bulls, so it was basically a passing of the torch. And then on November 7th, 1991, Magic would make a massive announcement and said that he contracted the HIV virus, so he would have to retire from the Lakers. He did not have AIDS because they tested him and his wife for AIDS. Nothing. So it's just the HIV thing, which is less deadly than AIDS. Unfortunately, though, the league had backlash over his initial response to Magic's diagnosis. There's debate about player safety and discrimination. Magic couldn't really play in the NBA much anymore, and it was the blood thing. Magic was actually added into the 1992 All-Star game by the fans, and he played well. But that was his only game. But then 3 years later, in 1995, somehow, in some way, he decided to come back as a Laker. He didn't really have much of a good season and all that. But I mean, Magic was still decent on the court. Of course, the misinformation and the debates were kind of big in the 90s. Like, everyone thought that it was a gay person's disease, which HIV is not. Now, there's AIDS. You can get it from, bad blood transfusions and all that. Golden Girls taught me that. And, yeah, Magic said that was because of his sexual activities and all that. That's what he said. Anyway, number 6 is MJ's retirement in 1993, his first one. Michael Jordan was this big guy that Chicago took after Portland decided to go for Sam Bowie. Portland justified it, saying that they needed a good center because practically 18 of the last 21 NBA champs had dominant centers, so that was the key. Bowie looked pretty good in Kentucky, despite the fact that there should have been a red flag because he missed 2 seasons because of his foot injuries, which were primed with male ballerinas. That's how rare they were. Anywho, MJ went to Chicago. They quickly went through the mountaintop. 1991, they won the title. Then 92 and 93. So he was a 3-time champion. Unfortunately, though, during training camp for the 93-94 season, he made a shock announcement October 6, 1993, announcing that he would step down from the NBA. Of course, the same day as the White Sox Blue Jays Game 1 of the ALCS. MJ, it was just shocking that he decided to retire in his prime. He said that he didn't have the competitive spark and all that. What people didn't really know at the time was that MJ was fighting a family problem, as MJ's dad actually died while he was sleeping on the side of a road trying to get to a friend's wedding. 2 teenagers decided to hijack the car and shoot him and all that. They were caught, thankfully, and sentenced to life in prison. But yeah, MJ had lost his father because his father was almost always there at every Bulls game and challenged him and pushed him. MJ was a great player and all that. What the major rumor was that MJ had a gambling problem. He was losing money at golf. He was spotted at an Atlantic City casino in 1991 before a game against the Knicks. But the fact of the matter was that, yeah, MJ had lost his spark because, his father was the one that gave him the competitive spark from North Carolina to Chicago. So MJ would decide to do something big. He would retire, but then he decided to play baseball because his father said he had baseball talent. So he went to the White Sox organization because Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of the Bulls, owned the White Sox. And he went to Double A in Birmingham and all that. Despite what you think, MJ was not a pampered athlete at all. Like, he even paid for a team bus to take the Birmingham Barons on places. And, he would get to know the players. And at least he showed some compassion for those players. MJ nearly crossed the picket line in 95 when Major League Baseball, still without that strike resolution, decided to put replacement players. The only problem was the Blue Jays would be screwed the most because Toronto and Ontario, for that matter, has a rule against scab workers and all that. It wasn't some kind of thing about north of the border. It was a provincial thing because I don't think Quebec had any problems because Montreal never raised a stink about scab players. But MJ refused to cross the line to compromise himself as a replacement player. Fortunately, though, the strike was resolved and replacement players weren't needed. The season had to be shifted a few weeks, but whatever. So anyway, MJ went back to basketball, had that 2-word fax, "I'm back." And, he came back and helped the Bulls win another three-peat and then retired for the second time before going back to Washington. And, gambling could have been it. He might have been facing some gambling penalties from David Stern, but the fact of the matter is that MJ was still MJ. Number 5 is the massive trade feed for Chris Paul in 2011. CP3 has just retired, and stupidly, the Raptors had his contract, and he decided to retire before playing for the Raptors. One freaking game, Chris Paul. One game is all I fucking wanted. Nevertheless, CP3 was a good player from Wake, and he was a good point guard for the Hornets. And then there was a rumor he was going to move to Los Angeles. The Lakers were going to give Chris Paul and maybe the last piece of the puzzle. Unfortunately, David Stern, the commissioner, vetoed the trade, saying basketball reasons. A lot of people said that basically he didn't want a super team and, it would hurt small market teams. I mean, the Lakers would have sent New Orleans a king's ransom. So anyway, yeah, that was the big trade and all that. The New Orleans Hornets agreed to a 3-team trade, sending Paul to the Lakers. But the NBA owned the Hornets and notified because New Orleans would be better off by keeping Paul. But soon they would actually make the trade to trade him to the Clippers. Well, there was a trade, but the NBA added additional demands. So CP3 went to the Clippers in return for Eric Gordon, Chris Kaman, Al-Farouq Aminu, and Minnesota's first-round pick in the 2012 draft. All that. So, yeah. That's what happened, too. So, yeah. Well, the Raptors waived CP3, I guess. Yeah. But still, I mean, one game with the Raptors, or even go back to the Clippers. But anyway, yeah. So that trade veto was huge. Stern was trying to protect the small market team. Well, after all, they did own the team. Number 4 is the frozen envelope from 1985. So in 1985, the NBA decided to do something bold that the 3 other leagues didn't do with their draft. They would do a draft lottery. Baseball, the rules were that the worst team in the American League would get the number 1 pick the first 1 year, and then the worst team in the National League the next year, and all that. They would rotate. Football, they didn't really do a draft lottery and all that. They have never done a draft lottery and all that. They're the only one of the big 4 leagues that haven't done that yet. Well, baseball does a draft lottery. And hockey, in 95, they did the draft lottery because of the tanking and the Alex Day situation, which actually bit Ottawa in the butt. But yeah, hockey didn't have the draft lottery until 95. Hockey was just like the worst team gets the best pick. However, though, the NBA knew there was massive tanking. It was so prominent. In 1984, Houston, they were doing decent. And when they lost their key players, they actually decided to sit out their best players. That was suspicious, and the NBA decided to do something about it. Of course, basketball, the rules were that the worst team in the East and the Western Conference would settle on a coin flip. You win the coin flip, you get the one pick. You lose the coin flip, you get the number 2 pick and all that. That was kind of pathetic. It was down to a coin flip. Well, the big coin flip was 1984 when Houston actually had the first overall pick and Portland had the second one. Even though they were the same conference, Portland had the number 2 pick because they actually got the pick from Indiana in a trade 3 years prior, and Indiana was the worst team in the East. Houston won the coin flip. Anyway, so the NBA decided to do a draft lottery. The 7 teams in the NBA at the time that didn't make the playoffs, there were only like, 20 teams in the NBA at that time? Yeah, in 1985, before the big expansion in the late 80s. But anyway, yeah. The 7 teams that missed the playoffs would get envelopes and drawn by David Stern at New York City headquarters. And, it went from 7 to 1 and all that. So that's what happened. And the Knicks beat the Pacers for the number 1 pick. And Pat O'Brien, who was doing that for CBS, said basketball is back in New York because the Knicks were starting to struggle at the gate. Bernard King was off injured, and they were in trouble. So the Knicks ended up getting the number 1 pick, and they got Patrick Ewing, this guy from Georgetown who almost went to the 1984 draft, but he promised his mom he would finish his college career as a senior, and he did. So yeah, Patrick Ewing went to the Knicks, and it helped New York get back into the swing of things in the early 90s and all that. There's a lot of conspiracy theories. Of course, Namba and his YouTube page said that, they did the frozen envelope theory. And the theory was that the NBA purposely put some dry ice in New York's envelope so that David Stern, when he went in the drum and took the first pick, it would have been the one for the Knicks. There's even a theory that, one of the representatives who was putting the envelopes in the drum actually banged the New York Knicks envelope against the drum. And if you see the drum, you're right. He puts the 3 in gently. And then the 4th one, he flings it in. And the other 3 he puts in gently. So basically, that probably was the key for David Stern to see that and all that. But yeah, that does make sense. It didn't completely work. The Knicks never won a title with Patrick Ewing, but still. Number 3 is Donald Sterling, that racist you-know-what, in 2014. Donald Sterling was the owner of the Clippers since the 1980s. He took the team from San Diego to Los Angeles to compete with the Lakers for LA's stuff. But the Clippers got the small sports arena, where the Lakers got the Great Western Forum. The Clippers were basically mocked for their lack of making the playoffs and just sucking so badly that NBA in 2001 declared them the worst NBA, sports franchise in history of the 4 major sports: baseball, basketball, football, hockey. Well, the Clippers just had troubles. Elgin Baylor was a great player for the Lakers, not really a great exec with the Clippers. The Clippers were trying to get close to Big Brother, that being the Lakers. So anyway, Donald Sterling aside, he was a bad owner and all that. Unfortunately, in 2014, it finally spiraled and all that. TMZ leaked a racist phone call he made to his mistress and all that. So, of course, those things. And just basically telling his girlfriends not to bring those guys to the team. Well, he could have meant like LA Lakers players like Magic Johnson because, not part of the Lakers. But no, he mentioned those guys as in, the black players. Legal outraged, and everyone was outraged too. People threatened to sit, but Adam Silver, in his second year as commissioner, brought the hammer down and gave Donald Sterling a $2.5 million fine and banishment from all NBA activities. It was the right thing to do, and I think he was going to do it anyhow. The Clippers were sold to Steve Ballmer, co-founder of Microsoft, who has done great with the Clippers. Yeah, the on-the-court stuff is not that great, but Donald Sterling freaking is like a fan. He's doing giveaways. He built the Clippers this new facility called the Intuit Dome that hosted the 2026 NBA All-Star Game. Guy is on the sidelines, and he's done great for the community. All that. That's a ray of sunshine the Clippers really, really need it. Number 2 is the Tim Donaghy betting scandal from 07. Remember when I said that was not the end of the betting thing when I talked about number 8? Well, this is it. Tim Donaghy, great official and all that, actually quietly decided to admit that he had bet on games he officiated, which questioned everyone's integrity about NBA officiating. Donaghy went through the college ranks and then the NBA by 1994. He was good, but unfortunately, Donaghy made some critical mistakes, bad ejections. He was just erratic, especially in the 2002 Western Finals in Game 6 with the Lakers versus the Kings and all that. He would make massive calls against the Kings and great calls for the Lakers and all that, giving Shaq a lot of free throw attempts. So yeah, that caused a lot of problems and all that. And finally, in 2007, it was found out that he was betting on games he officiated. He would set up the point spread and say, I'll make this call, I won't make this call, blah, blah, blah. I'll influence the game. But it bit him in the butt, and the NBA was just basically hit hard. And number 1 is the Malice at the Palace 2004. I never thought of it that much. I didn't really read into this event till Saturday when there was a thing to do with college football on ABC, and then there was a news break about this brawl between the Pacers and Pistons. I thought, it's just an NBA brawl whatsoever. But on the Monday, I learned more into it. I leaned more into it as it was found out that with under a minute left between the Pistons and the Pacers, a game that Indiana was definitely going to win, Ben Wallace was fouled hard by Ron Artest, as he was known as at the time. But Ben Wallace took offense and shoved Artest, and there would be a fight. Pacers and Pistons players would be fighting and all that. Ron Artest decided to do something shocking. He decided to go to the scorer's bench. He wanted to be on the Indiana Pacers radio thing, but they said no. But Artest did a calm and cool thing. He actually laid down on the scorer's table. He got out of the trouble and all that. Surprised that no one wanted to go over to Artest and beat him up. Worst of all, when Artest was on the scorer's table, something like a cup of fluid hit him. And then he decided to do something really shocking. He went into the stands and tried to beat up the fans and all that. And he was not too happy about it. Why would you be happy about it? Basically, fans got involved, were trying to pummel the Pacers players who came over the scorer's table to try to protect their teammate. The fans were just terrible, throwing stuff at the Pacers after the game was called. Despicable behavior. Many fans got arrested, charged, and thrown out of the NBA forever. The worst part was that the Indiana Pacers were really hampered. 6 or 7 of their players got suspended for at least one game. The Pacers at one time had to have a very short bench. What's worse is that Ron Artest got booted for the rest of the season and the playoffs for what he did. So that just added fuel to the fire and all that. So, that's just pathetic what Artest did. It really cost him. And basically, the cloud over all those players, including the Pistons players, would ruin them in the days to come. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond.